You're listening to the Fan2Fan podcast, episode 12. Welcome once again to the Fan2Fan podcast. This is your host, Bernie Gonzalez, and I am here yet again with my friend who's been toughing it out through the Marvel Cinematic Universe, my boy, Andre Walker.
What up, B?
It's been grueling, but you know what? It's been kind of interesting to go through all of these films that Marvel has released for quite some time. We've talked about from the original Punisher film with Dolph Lundgren, Blade. We've gone through Ang Lee's The Hulk. We finished up with the sequel to Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. And we now find ourselves in 2008, where we are talking about the film that really started. It was the inaugural film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Jon Favreau's Iron Man.
Iron Man is one of the best made, well thought out superhero movies ever. I think Jon Favreau does not get enough credit for what he did with that movie. Robert Downey Jr. knocked it out of the park and turned Tony Stark into a AAA box office character on a level of Batman. But all that really goes to the direction and the vision of Jon Favreau. He did a great job of seeing what Iron Man could be, modernizing the storyline, and I think respecting and liking the character to actually produce a really great movie. Marvel takes unexpected directors who you may not know of from this genre, and they say, you know what? We don't care if this guy has a resume. This guy is a storyteller. This guy knows characters. This guy knows how to shoot an action sequence. This guy knows exactly what we want. And Jon Favreau did a fantastic job making probably to this day the most important. It is probably right now the most important superhero movie going forward because it started a franchise and a brand. And this was almost a little engine that could, because Jon Favreau and Marvel took a risk with this movie. They took a risk with Jon Favreau. They took a risk. Everybody loves Robert Downey Jr. now, but they forget who Robert Downey Jr. was and his past, his checkered past, and making him the flagship of a Disney comic book Marvel movie was a big risk, paid off big time with one of the finest superhero movies that still holds up to the day of our generation.
Absolutely right. Especially when you think about Robert Downey Jr., how a lot of the moments in his life, especially the bad ones, have been in the public eye. So to go out for a Disney film, right? Well, eventually a Disney film.
Yeah, I mean, Disney bought the rights to Marvel, so it was a Disney movie.
Yes. So he is your lead after they had considered Nicolas Cage, Tom Cruise, and probably whatever number of actors were hot at the time. But I remember those were two of the big name actors that they were looking at to play the part of Tony Stark. And the movie itself had gone through a number of different variations, from becoming much more sci-fi in its nature. At one point, MODOK was going to be the villain. The rights went everywhere from Universal to 20th Century Fox. New Line Cinema at one point bought the rights from Fox, and there were a number of different back and forths. Quentin Tarantino was at one point approached to write and direct Iron Man. Imagine what that would have been like. But to see what would eventually happen with Marvel Studios creating what was their first independent feature in Iron Man with a director like Jon Favreau, who at that point had just directed Elf. And that really was one of the only films that he had under his belt.
He had that, and the other movie that he directed that is a fan favorite, well, not fan favorite, a favorite of mine is Zathura, which is sort of the spiritual sequel to Jumanji.
Yes. It's
a pretty good movie starring a young Peeta from Hunger Games. I forget his name right now. I can't think of his name.
Yep.
And Kristen Stewart from Twilight. He did a great job in that movie. Family action. The movie had action. The movie had good visual effects. He took all that knowledge and he just blended it and worked his butt off and created just a great story, great characters,
and a contemporary story, because it wasn't something where it was related to the past. But I mean, this was about a character who essentially gets his origin in Afghanistan as a military weapons manufacturer. And while he's doing a demo, he gets captured. So we're not talking about World War II. We're not even talking about Vietnam. We're talking about Afghanistan, something that is very contemporary, very much, of our generation. So to bring Tony Stark into that world, and it doesn't make it impossible to think that the Stark brand would be the ones that made the Patriot missiles back from the Iraq War. Completely makes sense. But to kind of combine the idea of Tony Stark is kind of like Howard Hughes, Elon Musk from SpaceX and all this stuff, this kind of like futuristic, forward-thinking scientist slash, billionaire, financier, manufacturer, and kind of putting it all together. That was something that created a very fan favorite version of Iron Man. It took a character that was an Avenger in the comics, but I mean, we weren't talking about Thor, Captain America, or the Hulk for that matter. I mean, we were talking about a character that had never really seen a big screen version and catapulted him into becoming the cornerstone of what is now the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah. Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts, Terrence Howard as Rhodes, and Jeff Bridges. And then, I mean, another, you can't praise enough of Robert Downey Jr.'s performance as Tony Stark. It's iconic. If you look at people like Donald Trump and Mark Cuban, and look at how rich billionaires are celebrities now, and how he took a character who was Howard Hughes knockoff and he modernized it and made him, like he said, the characters to him and John Favreau said they wanted to make him a lovable asshole, and that's what they did. Tony Stark is one of the lifetime characters that Robert Downey Jr. brought presence to, and I just can't say enough how he took a D-list Marvel character
and he made him a likable asshole.
He made him on par with Bruce Wayne. I mean, Tony Stark was a low-level character in Marvel. He was in Civil War, but
he didn't have a lot of main stories. I mean, the one story that everyone always goes to,
Demon in the Bottle.
That's he's an alcoholic, but that's about it.
Yeah,
and the fact that that he
and he's a Howard Hughes knockoff. That's the two things. He's based on Howard Hughes, and he is an alcoholic and loves and womanizer, sort of like an alcoholic, smart James Bond. To give him a character, to do this to him, and make him a AAA character with Marvel. I mean, can you imagine that? Can you imagine taking a character who is a D-list character and saying he is just as valuable to Marvel as Bruce Wayne, Batman, is to DC? That's just ridiculous. And that's all attributed to the performance of Robert Downey Jr. And to this day, if you look at the box office numbers, the Iron Man movies are the only movies, standalone Marvel movies, that have crossed the $400 million mark. They're the only ones. And that's not to say the other ones are not good. The other ones are just as good. But Robert Downey Jr.'s performance is that great. It's like watching a Batman movie for people for Marvel. That's how good Robert, and I just want to put that across again, how great of a job he did with that movie before we move on.
They introduce Phil Coulson, played by Clark Gregg. Nick Fury gets a cameo, played by Samuel Jackson, in an end credit sequence that kind of sets up what would eventually become the Avengers. But you think about it, there was a plan that they were doing it. Even as their first film on their own, Marvel was thinking, you know what, if we can make people like Iron Man and Robert Downey Jr. can pull that off, then maybe, just maybe, we can build on with something else that's more recognizable, like a Captain America. And they did it.
And they did. I mean, what a crazy bold plan to do what people have done in comic book. It's never been done before. To do what they've done in comic books. I remember when the next movie we'll probably talk about later on came out, where Tony Stark made an appearance in that movie. We'll talk about it later. It was the first time that a character from one movie had made an appearance in the same character in a different movie.
You wouldn't be talking about The Incredible Hulk.
I'll be talking about The Incredible Hulk movie.
Also in 2008, same year. So Universal releases it. Edward Norton. Ed Norton now takes over as Bruce Banner, and he becomes the next version, the rebooted version of the Hulk. So Louis Leterrier directs it. I'm a big fan of this film. I like everything about it. I remember the first time I saw this, and I think at some point we talked maybe a few minutes afterwards.
We saw it.
Did we see it together?
We saw me, you, and Chris.
I just remember thinking they Jason Bourne the Hulk, and this has become a thing where we've taken Jason Bourne and made him a verb. Okay, so what are you going to do with James Bond? If people feel that the kind of misogynistic, kind of like a 70s version of James Bond might be kind of lost, that people may not connect with that anymore, what do? They Jason Bourne James Bond. When you have a character like the Hulk, who had a poor showing for the first time in theaters with the Hulk, and now you have to do something with him, and you get an actor that's pretty solid in Edward Norton.
More than
pretty good.
Pretty good.
And you have him with a director that is definitely not like Ang Lee, so we're not talking about trauma and emotion and everything else being kind of like on the forefront with Hulk smash in the background. And you have Louis Lederer, who's an action director, and you say, all right, we're going to give him the Hulk, and they Jason Bourne up the Hulk.
Not only that, Louis Lederer has stated that he grew up, I forget his nationality, I think he's French.
He's
French. So. He grew up in France, and one of his favorite TV shows growing up was the old Incredible Hulk TV series. And he went back and called back to that old series and took Bruce Banner and that movie back to that, what Bruce Banner's on the run from the military. He's trying to find a cure, and everybody's attacking him. They even used the music from the TV show in there, and they cut scenes of Bill Bixby, God rest his soul.
Yes.
And they intercut stuff like that to throwbacks of the original Incredible Hulk TV series, which I thought was smart. They cut back to the thing where his eyes change color, just like the old TV series when he changes to the Hulk and gets angry.
Those were the things that we remember that we enjoyed about the Hulk.
Yes.
And that's what set up the character, not just for us, but for people in general.
Exactly.
For pop culture.
And this movie is the sort of redheaded stepchild of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It rarely gets... I mean, now probably is the most time that they finally acknowledge the movie, bringing Thunderbolt Ross from that movie to play Secretary of Defense in the new Civil War movie that we'll talk about coming up. But they really kind of not played around with that movie, and they kind of did that movie and let it slide. But there's nothing to be ashamed about that movie. That is a solid movie. It did not do the box office that they wanted, and it wasn't the reboot that Universal and Marvel were hoping for. But I think it's still one of the strongest movies that they've done, especially early movies, especially one of the early movies. Definitely a solid follow-up to Iron Man, in my opinion.
And one of the things I remember about that film when we watched it was Tim Roth, when they introduced his character, and the first scene where he's using his newfound abilities, and he's fighting the Hulk. And I just remember at one point after we saw the film, we were thinking, if that's how you can display Captain America on film, he's not moving too fast, but he's moving faster. He's not Hulk strong, but you could tell that he's stronger and that he's more agile. If you can somehow make Captain America do what Tim Roth does in The Incredible Hulk with his character, then maybe you could do Captain America, and then maybe it could work.
The scene, if you see that, the scene where, like you said, the first time that Tim Roth, after he gets the modified super soldier serum injected into his body, and he goes to try to take the Hulk, and he's doing his stuff, he's shooting, he's jumping around, he's flipping, he's running past everybody, and we're like, if they can just do that with the Captain America movie, that we could have a really good Captain America movie. And lo and behold, later on we'll talk about it, they actually did it, and it was great.
Yes. Kind of sad to see that Edward Norton is not a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe anymore.
Yeah.
I think there's a role for him somewhere just because he's such a talented artist. And even on the movie, he did, I don't know if he received writing credits, but he did contribute in the writing room because he felt there was a connection there, and he felt like he needed to kind of elevate the script. And when you have, like, I don't know that Louis Lederer had directed anything before that.
I think he did some movies with, I forget the guy, La Femme Nikita.
Okay. I know he went on to direct the Clash of the Titans remake.
He worked with him. I think he was an assistant director with, I forget his name, Luc Besson.
Luc Besson.
He worked with Luc Besson, the French directors, and he worked with Luc Besson. I think he directed maybe one of the Transporter movies or something like that, or he was an assistant director on one of the Transporter movies. That's where he got to start. Yeah, I think that the thing to remember, too, with the whole Edward Norton thing is that there was a dispute with Edward Norton and Marvel, because like you said, he did kind of help co-write the movie, and Edward Norton thought he had final say and final cut of the movie, and Marvel said no, you don't, because he wanted a longer, more thought-provoking Hulk movie, and Marvel wanted to keep it tight and action-packed because they had screwed up with the original. So Edward Norton refused to do any press when the movie came out. And if you look on the DVD, there's not that much footage of Edward Norton doing interviews and stuff. It's like 1 or 2 things where Edward Norton does interviews because he refused to do any press because he wasn't getting final cut of the movie. So when they eventually did the Avengers movie, Edward Norton was still under contract. He even messed with Josh Whedon because Edward Norton said that, well, I had a dispute with Marvel, but a lot of those people that were with Marvel at the time, they're not with there anymore. So things move on, and I'm actually looking forward to working with this cast for the Avengers, and I'm looking forward to working with Josh Whedon. And then Marvel put out this scathing letter about how Edward Norton was not a team player, how he was selfish, how he was arrogant, how we don't want people like that with us. And it was shocking. Go look it up. Put Edward Norton Marvel Hulk on Google, and you will see the letter that the head of Marvel put out and just lambasted him. And then Norton put out another letter lambasted Marvel for disparaging his name. So that pretty much ended the Edward Norton Hulk involvement for future, and began the Mark Ruffalo credible Hulk era.
That was the beginning of a Hulk on screen era. Mm-hmm. Shall we talk about the end of era for the Punisher? 2008, Punisher's Warzone. This is going to be the blip on the radar because I don't know that either one have anything good to say. You love the character. We love Thomas Jane. You know what? I loved him in that short film Dirty Laundry. Mm-hmm. So that was terrific. Mm-hmm. But then to make Warzone and again just completely go back to a character that you think they could pull off.
Still have him stuck with the 90s style, over the top. I mean, they had a guy skateboard across and his Punisher shoots him with a rocket launcher as they parkouring across a building. I would say the only thing positive about this movie is Ray Stevenson was the best looking Punisher. If you you mentioned earlier in one of the podcasts about Tim Bradstreet's art. Go look at Tim Bradstreet's art and look at Ray Stevenson and tell me that he does not look like the Punisher.
With the right shadow dropping on his face, absolutely.
He looks exactly like the Punisher. He's the right height, right build. He's menacing. He was great. Rest of the movie, absolute POD garbage. Barely a Sci-Fi Channel movie, in my opinion. Enough said about that.
Yep. Andre and I will get back to talking about the Marvel movies in just 1 second. In the meantime, if you are listening on iTunes, please take a moment to rate and review. Just search for the Fan2Fan podcast, go under reviews, enter a star rating, or write a review if you have a second or two, and click send. That's how easy it is. Takes a few seconds. I will greatly appreciate it. Thanks.
And now, on with the show.
2009. X-Men Origins Wolverine. So Hugh Jackman comes back. We have Liev Schreiber playing the role of Sabretooth. You have Jackman. I just remember the first time that I saw those shots of Jackman when he doesn't have a shirt on and everything. You're just like, all right, he's taking the role of Wolverine like beyond seriously. This is insane. But unfortunately, in my book, it was not the film it could have been. So what did you think about it?
Horrible movie. They had some ideas here and there where they played around with the, I think it was X-Men Origins, Wolverine Origins.
Yes.
Where they played around with the origin with Wolverine.
And that was a big comic book when it first came out because it was the idea of, okay, now we finally get to see where he came from.
Mm-hmm. His real name.
Correct.
Find out Wolverine's real name.
And they brought a lot of that into the movie. And, even bringing in the idea of calling it X-Men Origins Wolverine, as if to say we're going to do X-Men Origins Cyclops, X-Men Origins maybe Magneto.
That was the idea.
I believe Magneto was one of the guys.
Magneto was supposed to be next, and I don't know who. Maybe Xavier. I think Xavier was supposed to be one of the things, and that's how we kind of got First Class. I think that was going to be an Origins line. X-Men Origins this, X-Men Origins Psylocke. X-Men Origins all these characters. But the Wolverine movie, keep it short and sweet. It was horrible. Interesting casting. Liev Schreiber was rumored to maybe be in this Wolverine movie as Sabretooth. Was an excellent Sabretooth. Hugh Jackman did his job. I can't think of the actor's name right now who played Gambit.
He was in Friday Night Lights. Yeah. He wound up being in John Carter. Yes.
He looked great. Not that great as an actor. He just looked great. As long as he didn't talk, he looked great. But the key about that movie, as everybody knows, the big thing about X-Men Origins is that's where we got Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool.
Yes.
And that from there on, and 10, 15 years later, we get the Deadpool movie today. So if there's
just 6 years later.
6 years later. Was it 6 years later?
Yeah, 2009 was X-Men Origins. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so 6 years later, we finally got the Deadpool movie.
Technically, it's 7 years later, but we're not doing math.
But that would be the only contribution that X-Men Origins contributed was getting Ryan Reynolds to play Deadpool, and finally getting the Deadpool movie today. So,
and not just Deadpool, just Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool.
Yes.
Because Deadpool's version.
And we were all the Deadpool at the end. We will not discuss. This has been discussed at length. We don't need to go into the more. It was a horrible decision.
If you're a fan, you know what we're talking about.
Taping up the Merkle the Mouse mouth so he can't talk and talk trash. So we'll move on to something else. Not a good movie. Not another dud for Fox. Isn't it? It is another trend
Absolutely,
here.
yes.
Another dud for Fox. Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, X-Men Last Stand. It's just in a trend here, but I think it turned around later on when we start talking.
2010. We see Iron Man 2 come out. Paramount is working again with Marvel Studios for as far as the release. Jon Favreau comes back to direct it. And we have Robert Downey Jr. again as Tony Stark.
This was a big controversial movie with a lot of people. A lot of people felt that Jon Favreau was given the Sam Raimi treatment, and he was forced to add characters to set up the Avengers movie. Because Samuel Jackson and Scarlet Witch were added to the cast, and a lot of people felt that they were not needed. They were just there to say, hey, we got an Avengers movie coming out pretty soon. Come look at us. And they don't think that this movie got the proper treatment that it should have gotten, because everybody was expecting this movie to be the Empire Strikes Back, and there was teasing that Jon Favreau teased that he was going to introduce the demon in a bottle storyline in this movie, but he was never going. There was never a chance they were going to do the alcoholic storyline, because Marvel was not going to do that with the character who is their flagship character. But there was a lot of stuff I liked. Me personally, I liked the movie. There was a couple of things here and there that I didn't like. There was a middle part of the movie that was kind of like dead, where nothing really happened. But for the most part, I love the beginning. I love the part where Tony Stark fights Whiplash.
Yep, played by Mickey Rourke.
Mickey Rourke did a great job. I loved Mickey Rourke's costume design with the prison fatigues and the whips and everything. It was great. I love the ending where War Machine fights the Iron Man bots,
who's now played by Don Cheadle and not by Terrence Howard, which was kind of a controversial thing on its own.
Another time when Marvel had a controversy with an actor. Terrence Howard didn't work out with salary, something about salary, and money was being paid, so they end up firing him, and they end up hiring Don Cheadle, who was a solid performer. I love Don Cheadle. Can't argue with Don Cheadle. Great performance.
And they've kept him on as Rhodes, the character, for a while. Scarlett Johansson bringing in as the Black Widow, and kind of setting up the character that she'll be playing for quite a few movies after this. So you got, like you said, they're setting up what eventually will become kind of like Avengers, because they're expanding the universe. Samuel Jackson makes a cameo again as Nick Fury. So they're kind of saying, hey, you know what, we're building towards something. And you got to admit, after you make Iron Man 1 and it's so successful, and Robert Downey Jr. does so well, if you're Marvel, that's exactly where you want to go. Let's keep building, and we'll take a character like War Machine that has a big connection to Iron Man, but really doesn't have a bigger connection to anything else. So if we don't succeed with him, then no harm, no foul. People won't think, oh, we just ruined Captain America, we can't use him. Same with Black Widow. She's essentially a spy. So people are not thinking, oh, she's a great character. We don't know her as a character. You know, fans, especially comic fans, will know her. But even then, as a member of the Avengers, it's not like they were introducing Thor into the mix, or even the Hulk and bringing him in here. It was Black Widow. So they could play it safe. They couldn't lose too much in bringing her in.
The one last thing I'll say real quickly is probably the most disappointing thing about this movie to me was usually when they add two villains, I'm usually against two villains in a movie, because that means it's going to be too much. But this time it actually made sense. I actually like the idea that Justin Hammer was supposed to be Tony Stark's fast-talking persona. If there's one person who can keep up with Robert Downey Jr.'s fast-talking slick, it's Sam Rockwell. Sam Rockwell can keep up with him. And then you separate that with the physical side of the Iron Man with Mickey Rourke's Whiplash. I thought it was a good mix. I thought they dropped the ball with Sam Rockwell's Justin Hammer. I thought he should have been more swagger, more smooth-talking, more used car salesman. Because Mickey Rourke did his job as imposing Whiplash, but they made Justin Hammer sort of dumb.
Yes.
He wasn't really that smart. He wasn't really that fast. He was
for a guy who was supposed to be Stark's business rival, you never felt like he was a rival.
Exactly. You know, it just really was disappointing that they underused Sam Rockwell, who was a fantastic actor, and that really disappointed me and my brother when we saw it. It was the one big negative thing I took away from that movie. Like I said, with some pacing issues here and there. But that was probably the biggest negative issue I had with the movie. But overall, I did like Iron Man 2. I liked it a lot more than a lot of other people did.
2011, Paramount with Marvel Studios releases the movie that would begin expansion into the Marvel Universe. And that's to say the least, because now we're going into the cosmic realm, and that's Thor.
Thor was interesting. Thor was, I'm kind of on the fence with Thor. I didn't hate it, didn't like it. I kind of understood what Thor was. It was a introduction into that world. They had to do an origin story. Okay, so that's tough. And then you have to do an origin story involving magic, which is tough. You have to do an origin story with magic, with mythological, godlike characters. So that's another tough one. So I always give Thor sort of a pass for being just okay, not bad. It wasn't bad. I don't think Marvel's made a horrible movie yet. And I don't think they made some disappointing ones. I don't think they made anything that was like bad, just disappointing. Or you maybe, I don't know, you could decipher the bad or not. And I thought Thor was okay. It wasn't my favorite of the Marvel movies. I didn't hate it the most of the Marvel movies. But, I thought it was okay. I thought Chris Hemsworth's casting was great. I thought he knocked it out of the park. What I thought was a tough character to cast as Thor. Chris Hemsworth was charming and likable and funny. Funny thing is that Tom Hiddleston's Loki, he was okay. He didn't really take off until later on, to one of the movies we'll talk about later on, that he really grabbed the screen. And I think it was because of, the director. But Tom Hiddleston was fine. Anthony Hopkins, Odin, Hopkins.
And all the other characters, like the Warriors with Ray Stevenson.
Yeah, Warriors 3, yeah.
The Warriors 3, Renee Russo was great.
Yeah, great. Yeah, she was fine.
You gotta love Idris Elba.
Natalie Portman.
Yes, the casting was great, and then the director. I just remember when they first announced that they were going to have
it was Kenneth Branagh.
Branagh directing it. I thought, wow, really, a guy who comes from very Shakespearean roots.
And it makes sense because Stan Lee always said that he never really understood that Thor was actually Norse and not English.
Yes.
And that's why Thor always talks with thee and thou and have at thee. It's like
lots of Shakespearean
even
elements.
Though from Norse, they should be talking with like that Scandinavian accent, but. Getting Kenneth Branagh to do it, he did a good job. I thought he did a solid job, not an amazing job. There was some disappointments with the third act, the last fight with the Destroyer, which looked amazing, and the Destroyer fight was over in 10 seconds. It was like, but overall, I thought it was a decent movie. I thought it was a decent, solid entry to the Thor's universe. Sort of like the first X-Men movies, like, okay, this is good. Just give me a better sequel. So
yes, which we would get in a few years. Mm-hmm. But in 2011, we get a reboot to a series in X-Men First Class. So we mentioned this before. Michael Vaughn was in consideration to direct X-Men Last Stand. Mm-hmm. Doesn't work out because of creative differences. They bring in Brett Ratner to finish up that series, but then Fox decides to reboot. This time, they bring in Bryan Singer, who directed X-Men 1 and 2. As a producer and as a writer. But James McAvoy comes in and he takes on the part of a young Charles Xavier, taking on the role from Patrick Stewart. And we have an entire new set, a new class of gifted youngsters that they are introducing. Yeah, pun intended. Directed by Michael Vaughn, who was known for Layer Cake, that were much more visual.
Yes, Layer Cake.
Exactly.
Stardust.
Yes, yeah. So it was kind of an interesting place to come from for an X-Men movie. The casting outside of James McAvoy, I will always remember this because if you go back to our episode where we discussed X-Men, Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen were peers. They were rivals, but you could understand that they were equals to each other. And when they cast Michael Fassbender to James McAvoy, it's not that I've never not been a fan of James McAvoy. He's fine. He's an okay actor. But Michael Fassbender just steals the movie for me.
Disgusting. Michael Fassbender is disgusting. He is amazing as Magneto. He could the fact that you get Michael Fassbender as a young Ian McKellen, and you say that guy would become Ian McKellen. You can believe it. Talk about the regalness, the charm. I mean, and then Matthew Vaughn's playing Magneto as sort of a James Bond 70s type character fit because he looks kind of like he looks like James Bond. He should be the new James Bond. Just putting that out there. We'll do a podcast on James Bond someday about that. But Michael Fassbender was just excellent. He was intimidating. He was in pain.
The scene in the bar in South America with the knife and the gun and the emotion and just the
fact that Magneto could not use his power without rage. The opening scene where Kevin Bacon kills his mother.
Yes.
And Magneto goes in rage and kills the soldiers. It's like, wow, here we go again with X-Men rebooting, going to that hard place where you go like, this is not kiddie stuff. His mom is dressed up in the clothes that they held in Nazi concentration camps. It's just like, wow.
I will say that's the one thing that I'll give the X-Men credits for, the X-Men movies credit for, and maybe these are the directors and the producers that get the credit. They haven't shied away from that. Magneto comes from a concentration camp. This is where his powers evolved. This is where they became.
Yes.
Then they said that's what we're going to show. X-Men First Class, same thing. It becomes basically a Nazi hunter where he's going through all these places trying to find the people, particularly Kevin Bacon's character who's playing one of the members of the Hellfire Club, and trying to see how he can get his revenge. So we're following his story, and then it's kind of like the X-Men story kind of both come together.
The X-Men are in the background. It's really about Magneto and Stewart. Magneto and Xavier.
Yes.
And I actually liked James McElroy's Xavier. I can see that guy coming Patrick Stewart, just like I can see. No doubt, Michael Fassbender steals the show. He eats the screen. Every time Magneto's not on the screen, like, bring back Magneto. He's such a badass. He's cool. But I thought James McElroy did a good job of being the, Martin Luther King, peace. I can see that character becoming the Patrick Stewart's character, and I thought he was a solid choice. It's the Patrick Stewart, James McElroy, Xavier. It's just not the glamorous part. The Magneto is the more glamorous part, so it's hard to be on par with Magneto in that rage and that anger. The scene, that one scene with them together where Magneto gets to finally use his powers because Xavier goes into his mind and pulls out the memory of the first time that the last time his mother wishes him happy birthday, and a tear come down his eye, and he thought he lost.
This is the scene where he moves a satellite dish?
Yeah, that's the scene. That scene was powerful. I remember when he saw that he was done. He was Michael Fassbender. Who do you think should play Wonder Woman? Michael Fassbender. Who do you think should play Flash? Michael Fassbender.
I remember when they were talking about casting for Batman.
Oh my God!
And Michael Fassbender was probably one of the first actors that I thought of. I'm like, if you're gonna reboot Batman,
don't do that.
And guess what?
No.
He could also play Superman.
No, don't put that man in there. No, Lex Luthor. He'd be Lex Luthor. No, don't put him in there. No, Michael Fassbender. But
Michael Fassbender, if you're listening, just do what you're doing.
Oh, he's great. But the X-Men First Class was a really solid reboot that really re-energized the franchise, put a new take on the X-Men movies. And I think Fox finally stopped throwing dirt on themselves and buried themselves with the bad superhero movies that they had just list of bad super. You go look at the Fox list. You go look at some of the top 10 worst superhero movies ever made. On anybody's list, 9 out of 10 of them are made by 20th Century Fox. So good on you, Fox, for rebooting a popular franchise. So
you know who'd play a really good Sue Storm, Invisible Woman?
Who would that be?
Michael Fassbender.
I'm not arguing with you.
No, you wouldn't. I'll conclude my conversation with Andre in just a second. Remember, you can find the Fan2Fan podcast at www.fanpodcast.com. Facebook, just search Fan2Fan Podcast. That's FAN, the number 2, FAN. Or on Twitter, at Fan2Fan Podcast. I'd love to hear from you, so reach out, send a message, and let me know what you think of the show. Thanks. Another good movie in 2011, Captain America, the First Avenger. So you get Chris Evans taking on the mantle as the symbol of patriotism of not only what would become the Avengers franchise, but he's the Dudley Do-Right character for the Marvel Universe. And here he is being introduced properly for the first time, not as a product of the 80s or the 90s with some of the films that we discussed before in the first part Marvel podcast, which you should listen to. You know who would be a great guest for our podcast?
Who would that be?
Michael Fassbender.
I'm not going to argue with you.
That's right. So you got Captain America coming out, and I remember when we saw Captain America. Mm-hmm. I am a big fan of the pulp era, of movies of that kind of, the Rocketeer, Dick Tracy, The Phantom, The Shadow. I like those films that kind of like have a bit of a step back into the 40s and 50s era, but at the same time, the idea that they decided to bring in an actor like Chris Evans, who had already played the role of the Human Torch, so they weren't afraid of recasting and bringing in somebody to play a character again. I was like, okay, this is pretty neat. I like where they're going with this.
Captain America I've always been a huge fan of Captain America. I've always thought of Captain America as sort of like Joe Montana of superheroes. He's the guy, no matter what you do, no matter what you plan, no matter what you set up, he's been there, done that, seen it before. He's been fighting, crime since the 40s and Nazis. He's the guy you always count on to come out in the end and have the strategy to take you down no matter what you do. When I heard they were doing the Captain America movie, I was excited. When I heard about the casting choices, I was not excited. The thing about Captain America that is tricky is that Captain America was, in the books, he's frozen when he's about 25, 26, 27 years old. He's still a young man, and he's brought back into the modern day era. He's still like 25, 26, 27 years old. But in the books, they always play him as a lot older. They always they draw him as somebody who's like 40 or 50. But he wasn't frozen in time. And that's always is inside of me. So when I heard some of the casting choices, I'm like, why are they getting somebody so young to play Captain America? And I thought about it like, yeah, he was like 27 years old when he's frozen, so he would be that young. So I kind of, settled myself like, okay, they're casting it the way the book is supposed to be, not the way artists draw him. But some of the casting choices they were talking about, I think we were talking about a little while ago, the guy who played Gambit and the X-Men Origins, they were talking about Taylor Hitch. Taylor Hitch.
Nice.
They were talking about Taylor Hitch. They were talking about the actor who played in Tron Legacy, who was, oh my goodness, so flat and boring. That's another thing with Captain America. I love the character, but he always plays so old. He was in
Friday Night Lights, the movie,
yes.
And Taylor Kitsch was in the Friday Night Lights, the TV series. Show.
So it's funny, yeah. And they were talking with Alex Pettyfer, who played in Magic Mike, and he played in I Am Number 4. Oh my, just a horrible, horrible cast. And they mentioned Chris Evans. And I said, Chris Evans? Chris Evans has made a history of playing bad boys. But the thing with his bad boys, like we talked about in the Fantastic Four, movies, he plays a charming bad boy.
Yes.
He plays a likable bad boy. And I thought if he could just pull back that bad boy and just play somebody likable, he could do it. And I was rooting for Chris Evans to get it, and I was happy he got it. And man, Robert Downey Jr. gets a lot of credit for doing a great job of playing Tony Stark, which I'm not taking anything away from him. It's an easier job to do than play Captain America, who's a boring, square-jawed character who's a Boy Scout. But Chris Evans' portrayal of Captain America was so good in First Avenger. He didn't play him as this rah-rah, I love America, it's the greatest thing in the world. He played it as a guy who just doesn't like to see people picked on. I don't like bullies. I don't like people being picked on and told me that I can't do anything. And his portrayal as Steve Rogers, this goes back to what I said again. They cast Steve Rogers. You're going to hear me say this a lot with Marvel movies. They cast the actor to play the alter ego and not the ego. So when he put the suit on, I was rooting for him way before he even put on the suit. I was rooting for him when he was fighting the guy bully in the alley. I was rooting for him when he went to go save Bucky. When he finally put the Captain America costume on, which was amazing, I want to say. Great job to the costume designer there from taking the Ultimates costume and turning it into a costume. And I love the fact that they played with the whole thing with him being a propaganda piece to build war bonds and stuff, and showing us the goofy Captain America costume from the original Captain America movie. And Chris Evans and the rest of the cast did such a great job with that movie. And one last thing with Captain America movie, I had a dispute with my brother with this movie because he didn't believe that you could do a pulpy 1940s character and to be successful. And he's predicted this to be the movie that would be Marvel's downfall. And when that movie came out, it came out opposite the second week of the last Harry Potter movie, which everybody knew was going to be a huge hit. And Captain America in its first week outgrossed Harry Potter in its second week. And my brother had to eat crow on that. So Captain America First Avenger will always be the movie that I got my brother to eat crow. So it will always hold a special place in my heart.
That's brotherly love right there.
You know who should be my brother? Michael Fassbender.
I would not argue with that. I would hang out with your brother a lot more. So I will say the one last thing I'll say about Captain America, my last thing, Joe Johnston. Mm-hmm. So having directed The Rocketeer, I was a little nervous because I thought maybe he was going to bring that pulp sensibility, which I love, but would that fit in this new Iron Man Marvel universe? But you got to give it to him. I mean, everything about this film, Chris Evans' portrayal of the character, the way they introduced Bucky, even Tommy Lee Jones. I will say a little bit that Hugo Weaving as the Red Skull, he comes in a little flat, and I don't know that I want to take that away from the film. If he had a bit more to play than just kind of like this Hydra Nazi type villain, maybe it could have gone more. But you also have to wonder, is he really more than that?
Yeah.
At least in this version of the universe, if they had more time to play with maybe his origin and how he came to be. One of the films that I love, I could watch it all day.
Yeah.
So moving on in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a movie that I'm going to see how long we're going to spend on this one, because we might be spending a lot of time, but I think this might be a record breaker. You ready for this, Joy?
Go ahead.
2012's Columbia release of Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance.
We won't spend a lot of time on this. I will say this, and I've been saying this in a lot of the other movies that came out. This movie is a guilty pleasure movie for me. I know it's trashy. I know it's garbage. I know it's horrible. But I kind of like it. I don't know why I kind of like it. I think I like that the directors, it's the directors who did a movie called
X vs. Sever?
X vs. Sever. No, they did the movie with Jason Statham, Trank? Was it Trank? It's the movie where Jason Statham has to take adrenaline to stay alive or he's going to die.
Okay.
I forget the name of the movie. It's a fast-paced, kinetic, crazy type of movie, and it's the two brothers who did it together. And it's stupid. I kind of like that they tried to do a little horror things with the Ghost Rider. And I actually really like the origin what they did to Ghost Rider. That the demon that actually possesses Ghost Rider is a fallen angel that was tricked into hell and tortured. It was a demon of justice, and after being tricked into hell and being tortured for thousands of years, justice became vengeance. And that's the demon that possesses Nicolas Cage's character. So he has a sort of a polluted idea of what justice and vengeance is. And I thought, yeah, that's actually kind of interesting. That he's not a demon that's inside him. It's a damned angel. Okay, it was pretty cool. But it's not a good movie. It's a guilty pleasure movie for me. I actually kind of like some of the scenes in it. We don't need to spend a lot of time talking about Spirit of Vengeance.
No, my 30 seconds on it, visually, I thought they killed it as far as the portrayal of the character of Ghost Rider.
Awesome. Really improved over the first one.
By far the best rendition of Ghost Rider. And like you said before, for the most part, he's a poster. He's an image. He's a visual that when you think about a flaming skull on a motorcycle, immediately you're like, that's cool. I want to see that. When you see it translated in film, especially in Spirit of Vengeance, it comes off great. It's just the fact that they never have taken the character to kind of follow with that awesome visual.
They need a good director like a Guillermo del Toro. They need a better solid actor like, who could they get to play Ghost Rider B? Who do you think would be a good person to play?
Michael Fassbender.
Yeah, well, I'm not gonna what you be. You're a smart man, so you should be president. But I think with a better actor, better director, they could do some things. Supernatural realm. They're doing it with Doctor Strange. Maybe someday we'll see a Ghost Rider TV series. Maybe so. But Spirit of Vengeance. Not need to talk too much more about that.
No. 2012, though, this is when the floodgates open. The Avengers. We have Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Black Widow, all coming together to fight a great villain in Loki. And now we are also introducing who was technically was introduced in Thor in Hawkeye. But we get to see a more fully fledged version of Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye in the Avengers. And least we forget
Hulk Smash.
Yeah,
this movie is there's not a lot of... Iron Man was one landmark movie as far as comic book superhero movies go. The original Batman 1989 movie was another landmark movie. Christopher Reeve's Superman movie was a landmark movie. Avengers is a landmark movie. It was a long time coming together, a movie that fans said will never, ever happen. Even before Marvel started this, they said you'll never see an Avengers movie. You'll never, let alone see a movie where they piece together slowly, piece by piece, book, like I'm thinking about this comic book,
sure,
movie by movie, and see them put together a connected universe in this Avengers movie. And anybody who said they would see it, everybody said it was going to be garbage because it was going to be a disappointment. It's going to be a letdown. And then they got Joss Whedon, who was a fan favorite director on it, and people start going, Serenity, Buffy, Angel, And then it came out, and Joss Whedon was able to do the almost impossible. He made an amazing movie. He got action, interesting characters. He gave everybody their time to shine. Nobody felt... Hawkeye did get shortchanged. I will give fans of Hawkeye who did get shortchanged. But I think toward the end, he got to show the Hawkeye that you know from the books. Cocky, arrogant, and everything in there. But it was great. And one big thing that he did with that movie, for Marvel at least, he finally gave Marvel their Joker. Because Loki, as I said in the earlier, was introduced in Thor, but he became the Loki that everybody loves in Avengers. Joss Whedon is a phenomenal writer, and if you get an actor who can suck up that writing, you can make a great character. Just ask the cast of Serenity. You know what I mean? Just ask some of the cast from Buffy. Tom Hiddleston sucked up that dialogue, and he is now Marvel's answer to the Joker. They have an answer to the Joker now. And Tom Hiddleston knocked it out of the park, and Joss Whedon and Marvel made one of the landmark. It's going to be a movie that's going to be copied for years. You already hearing about. They're doing. Paramount's trying to do Transformers combined universe with G.I. Joe. They're doing crossover movies with Ghostbusters and Men in Black, for Pete's sake. They're trying to take any kind of every studio that has any kind of movie franchises. The Universal's doing a horror movie franchise where they're taking all the horror characters and combining the universe because they want that horror movie because of the Avengers. That's how important this movie was. It was a huge box office hit. It set box office records. It was an entertaining movie. It is a big landmark movie. I can't say it enough. That changed the way we see movies.
Yes.
You're going to see movies differently because of Avengers.
You wouldn't even think of Justice League being possible unless Avengers succeeded, because you have Warner Brothers, who I'm sure in 2012 and well before that, having seen the success of Spider-Man, the success of Iron Man, the introduction of Captain America and Thor, they're kind of on the sidelines at this point. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is what Marvel is doing. They're starting to assemble the cinematic universe, and now the culmination is in Avengers. Well, we could do the same thing. We have Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman. We can introduce them together, bring in Aquaman and everyone else, and introduce Justice League. But it'll never work because we'll never be able to get to that point. But what does Marvel do? They take a slow approach, and they say, all right, you know what? If we can get people to like Iron Man, which really means if we can get people like Robert Downey Jr., they'll follow him. And if we can cast a good Captain America, they'll follow him. And when we bring them all together, like you said, it has to be a threat that's big enough that you could believe would be menacing to a god, to essentially, what's the line in Iron Man where he's like...
God, two spies... World's greatest soldier.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and a Hulk.
And a Hulk, yes. You have to be able to have a guy who can do all of that, bring it together, and they start introducing something even bigger, because they could have just gone into the whole Infinity Gauntlet Thanos thing, but they just said, you know what? We're going to build to something bigger, and we're seeing the fruits of that still developing. But they just said, let's go ahead and go with Loki, because we can bring him in, and then we have the Chitauri. Mm-hmm. And then we can show all the Avengers working in unison in New York, so we can have this alien attack and really elevate the threat to a point where it makes sense that you would have to have all these very powerful solo heroes coming together and, guess what? Assembling.
Yeah, it just was a perfect movie. Everything was well balanced. The story wasn't. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. The story wasn't deep and complex and riveting. It was a good enough story to get these characters together and have them have their time to shine. And it all paid off in this huge hit. It is still one of my favorite movies. It's one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. Maybe arguably could be considered one of the best superhero movies of all time, because they did something that was just impossible to think about when we were kids back in the 90s. They took all these characters and they slow rolled it together and made this combined Marvel movie. And just it cannot be said enough about the job Marvel did, slowly putting this together, sticking with the vision. Kevin Feige needs a lot of credit for being the steward of this whole thing and come to that point of Marvel. And that was just the start. That was phase one. That was just phase one. Everything you think, okay, they do the Avengers movie and that's it. That was just phase one. They had more to come. So it's just remarkable what they did with this movie.
And let's not forget that we get the reintroduced Hulk.
Oh.
Now played by Mark Ruffalo, mm-hmm. but this is now really the version of the Hulk. Mm-hmm. No angst, mm-hmm. no father issues. We get him in full Hulk smash mode, and he becomes a fan favorite after just a few little scenes. Mm-hmm. The shot where he ends up just like going through the city mm-hmm. and jumping from building to building, and you can just see, like you said, I agree with you. The way they rendered the Hulk in Hulk by Ang Lee was a little better. I like that one because it seems a little bit more realistic, which is a weird thing to say. More human, absolutely, especially the facial, the hair and everything. But then when you start seeing Mark Ruffalo play him, I totally believe it. Good balance as like another brain to Tony Stark, so that they have kind of like a good rapport back and forth with good Josh Whedon, the dialogue and characterization. You just see him in full Hulk smash mode and you think, all right, you know what? This really all works together. But what's even more interesting, and this is something Josh Whedon does well, when he takes those small characters and he gives them that one moment, that moment of Hawkeye and Black Widow realizing, yeah, we didn't train for this. We don't have the abilities to handle this like maybe Captain America or Thor or Spider or Iron Man. But we are in the middle of this, and it kind of takes something that's very big, cosmic, epic, and it humanizes it, because you're like, oh, these two guys, she's a spy and he's an archer, and they're in the middle of this alien invasion with a guy in an armored suit, old soldier, and a Hulk and a god, and all of them are coming together to try to stop this alien invasion and stop this crazed god, and Marvel pulls it all off. And that's why Avengers gets a sequel. But that's why it really is kind of like the culmination. Like you said, it's the milestone of Marvel's universe.
And it was just a checkpoint for them, and they're moving on and keep doing it. Because you would think this would be it, and we'll be done with it. Like, we can't do any better, and they continue to do different movies, and it's this great movie to sit back and appreciate what they were able to do.
All right, so you've been listening to our breakdown of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We've gone from, again, kind of like a recap, everything from the old Dolph Lundgren, Punisher films, Blade. We've gone through Fantastic Four. Now we wound up in Avengers. It's 2012, so you'll have to join us next time where we get through some of the last few movies, including Thor Ragnarok, Captain America, the Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, the Avengers sequel, and Ant-Man, and we go right into Captain America Civil War. Thanks for listening. That's it for this episode. Tune in next time for more Fan2Fan conversations on the Fan2Fan podcast. Thanks for listening.
Ask that hunk of metal if we're on the right course and how long it'll take us to arrive.
Direction, course exact. Estimated time of touchdown.